Hi everyone. My name's Aaron. I'm a freelance designer. I don't work at Webflow. I'm just a user like lots of you guys. And my history with Webflow is I joined before CMS was a thing, and it was just building static pages, and I fell in love with it instantly. So I've been using it for about over 4 years. And now I exclusively develop on Webflow. I don't see the need to go anywhere else. It's just the perfect system for me and my business. So I think the place I'm coming from is talking not in a super technical way about Webflow. It's really talking about how it's going to affect my professional life, it's the e-commerce part of it, and how I think it's going to affect all of yours in quite a profound way. So we'll just get straight into it. That's me. Right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was plugins. And I titled it Plugin Pain, Third-Party E-Commerce Systems and the Learning Curve, which is really wordy. But if any of you guys have ever used WordPress or any other systems and you introduce plugins, things become complicated. They can become really uncomfortable, and you've got like plugins that are interacting with other plugins, and you have to keep them up to date, and it's just an absolute nightmare. But Webflow, you don't have that issue. Webflow is a closed system. It's managed by the team around the world, and they're dealing with those conflicts for you. They're doing QA testing, they're coming up with features, so you just don't have those worries. You don't have those issues. I know when I go into Webflow and there's a new feature, I know it's just going to work, and I don't have to worry about it. And that's a massive thing for me in my professional life. I know that when I build out a store in Webflow, it's just going to work. And I know that when I'm using the CMS, I don't have to worry about it breaking. I just have to worry that it looks good and makes sense to the client. Like a lot of you, I've pretty much tried all of the e-commerce platforms. You know, WooCommerce, Weebly, Squarespace. I've tried them all, and none of them offer like the freedom of Webflow. They're just so, you have the theme, and you can only work with that. You don't have that layout structure that you can play with. You're really hemmed in, apart from changing logos and colors, things like that. We'll get into that a little bit later. But one of the things that I realized when going in, I think it's been touched on actually by the other two speakers, is that when I opened up and I first got alpha release of e-commerce, I went in and I was like super buzzed. I was like a kid in a sweet store, and I was just like, hit that e-commerce button, and it popped up. And then when it opened, I was like, oh, this feels really familiar. I've been here before. And like it was mentioned, it was based on the CMS. I intuitively knew how it was supposed to work. I knew, it just made sense. And I think that was touched on. And it really comes through as a user that it just made sense. So that was really good. So the beautiful thing about that is, talking about this learning curve idea, is that with Webflow, whenever there's a new feature, and especially e-commerce, you don't have that learning curve. When a client comes to me and says, hey, we want to use, WooCommerce with something, and maybe I'm not particularly au fait with it, then I've got a learning curve. I have to look into it, I have to look at documentation, and although you can do those things, and it was mentioned earlier, there's a wonderful plug for the university, .webflow.com, because there's amazing resources, and again, it was touched on earlier how comedy-filled those videos are in a really professional way. They're amazing. But I just know that Webflow will take care of it, and it all makes sense. And there's not many systems that can do that. So if you haven't checked out the university, do that. So I think that the main points there are keeping plugins up to date is a pain. And the learning curve can be a nightmare when you're trying out a new system. But Webflow's closed, and it just works so well. So the next thing I want to talk about is shopping. Shopping experiences. E-commerce is not new. We all know that. It's been around a really long time. But with the aforementioned, Weebly, Shopify, all these different things, you get into the theme, and that's all well and good. And it might be a really nice theme, but then there might be, hundreds of other stores with the same theme. And for me as a designer and developer, that's not very exciting. Opening up a store for a client and it's just a theme, it doesn't fill me with joy. It's like, great, I get to change some colors. Great. I want to create, an experience. I want to do something amazing. I want it to have a wow moment. shopping should be an exciting experience. It is when you go into a store. Like if you've ever been to There's one thing I wanted to share, actually, and it's the perfect example. That is my wife. We went to Paris. I don't know if any of you heard of Luderay. You heard of Luderay? They created the macaron. I mean, top of their game. And the point is here, no one gets that excited about shopping for pastries at Greggs. You know, Greggs is nice, but there's no one standing. My wife was buzzed. Look at her, she's standing outside with a bag. I've been to Luderay. No one's standing outside of Greggs going, I've been to Greggs. I've got a pasty. And then I put, well, maybe some people do, because it's not nice to tar everyone with the same brush. But that's the experience so far I've had with e-commerce, that I'm able to create experiences. And I ran a little experiment doing that. So this is a shop I created, just Nike skateboarding shoes, just a little. I built this really quickly, and that's the power of Webflow. It's a very standard layout, 3 columns, but I created this interaction for show more of the data. And this is the data that's in the e-commerce. This is built on the e-commerce. So we've seen the data points, obviously, with Elena's talk. But what we wanted to show is, with that data, how you can present it in many different ways. So that's pretty standard, really cool interaction. That's kind of nice. But if we go down a section, I created another one. Same data, completely different layout. And that's really exciting to me. And I created this, call it an interaction, add to cart, just because I can. And then again, and then you're into this section, which is pretty wild. I use CSS Grid for this, which is also in Webflow. But I just find it so empowering that I'm able to create these types of shopping experiences without having to touch a bit of code, using the same data, and you just can't do that anywhere else. So that's my experience with that so far. Moving on. This was touched on earlier, checkout. And I actually had some of the same thoughts. We hadn't cross-referenced our talks at all, so this was just really interesting that the key points, most checkouts are disjointed, and at worst, they're unsettling. I have a really good experience. It actually happened on Sunday. I was looking for stuff for this talk, actually. And I came across this website called Bracket Creative, and they have this really cool. They have nice branding. It's it's to the point, not too showy, but it's nice. It makes sense. And they have this book on creating effective workshops. I'm setting up a workshop, so I wanted to maybe look into that a little more. And while I was in there, I thought, okay, I'll buy that. It's only £3. So I clicked on the button, and this is what I was faced with. What the heck is that? That has nothing to do with where I just was. I was jarred. I was like, where am I? The key points, I was on here and I went, am I in the right place? The only thing that was tying this to where I just was the little picture of the book. And so it was really jarring and it was unsettling. And I even checked to see if I'd maybe been hijacked and taken to a different URL. Is it even secure? I have no idea. So one of the things I wanted to do was show how powerful Webflow is, because I thought, well, why don't I remake that in Webflow and show you guys. So in the Webflow Designer, I recreated the page, as you do. And this is the checkout experience. So this is using the e-commerce again feature. In this instance, this is what I feel you should have been met with. And I hasten to add, Webflow is so powerful, I created all of this in 30 minutes. So it takes you to the shopping cart, which is styled appropriately to the brand. And this is the wonderful part. I got to a checkout that makes sense. It's on brand. It has everything you'd expect. You're even able to use cheeky messages. Let's get this thing in your hands, or let's get this in your hands. You're able to add personality, like was mentioned before. And you can do really interesting things. This is arguably quite standard in layout, but it is on brand and it's on point. And it fills you with confidence. There's not a moment you get here and go, oh, am I in the right place? You know where you are. And then even, again, the confirmation, you're able to brand that again. It just makes sense. Think if your order, it's on its way, simple messaging, and it's all on brand again. And I think that's so important, that Webflow knew they were going to be creating e-commerce, and this is probably the thing that happens to most e-commerce stores, that they're just stuck with this theme and they're stuck with this checkout that they can't change, except for maybe colors. But Webflow recognizes this as an issue. And as was mentioned before, 7 out of 10 checkouts are abandoned, which I have just hijacked because I did not know that at the beginning of this. So that's really cool. Key points Most checkouts are disjointed, and at worst, they're unsettling, and it's the whole shopping experience that matters. It strikes me that when companies are creating checkouts and carts, maybe the team are like, they've created this wonderful product theme, maybe Shopify or something similar, and it's almost like the team then go, oh, do you know what? Once they've added it to the cart, job's done. It's going to go through, they're just going to buy it now. They haven't taken the whole journey into account. It's, as was mentioned earlier, that it's that journey from product to checkout to confirmation, and then the emails that follow and any other interactions you happen to have. And Webflow have nailed it, in my opinion. Extensible is the last one I want to talk about. And yes, I did have to Google that word because I wasn't sure if it was right. Don't judge me. Extending functionality. It was asked the question, I may be speaking out of turn, but I heard Kyle in a presentation talking about how they're opening up API endpoints for it, and how you'll be able to integrate that with other systems. He gave some examples. So maybe you would take the data from a sale and send it to a CRM, HubSpot maybe. Maybe you take it to Intercom, maybe put the data in there. Maybe even add people to a mailing list if GDPR isn't a thing for you. So it's just going to be extended. You're probably only really limited, because I've seen some of the endpoints that were mentioned, by your imagination, and especially with the less code inclined, and the less code I can do, the better, because I don't particularly enjoy it. They're going to have not only the API that you can use, webhooks, but Zapier as well. So that's really great news for me, and hopefully a lot of you as well. So that's really what I've understood about Webflow Ecommerce so far. And in conclusion, plugins and the learning curve, keeping them up to date, bug hunting, checking for conflicts will never be an issue with Webflow because they take care of all that for us. And then the learning curve is handled by their amazing tutorials and general help. If you've ever been in the forum, and if you've not been in the forum, I implore you to do so, because when you're in there, generally, if I have a question, there's always answered. There's always someone that's asked the question, and then you can just learn off of them. It's already there. Shopping experience. You can masterfully craft a bespoke and exciting shopping experience. I think that is priceless. And doing it so quickly as well. I think it was mentioned in Monica's about taking it from days, weeks to minutes, literally minutes. Checkout experience. At worst, a shopping cart and checkout experience can make you feel unsettled and untrusting. With Webflow, that will no longer be an issue. And I put ever, because I think it's really important. And it's incredible as well. And then extending Webflow. We just discussed it, obviously. Webflow's API and Zapier integration, we can extend the power to services and software that are imperative to your clients' businesses, because clients don't just use one system, they use many. And the fact you can tie those all together, that in itself, again, is priceless.